Okay, we are live. Hello and welcome everyone to our very first live stream from the studios at the McGee campus. This is all very exciting. My name is Greg O'Hanlon and I am the course director for Music, Sound and Technology, and that is pretty much what we're going to talk about today. The BSc Honours Music, Sound and Technology program, where our motto is creativity made audible. So creativity runs central to absolutely everything that we do. And then we think about how we can explore that in the audio domain. And there's many different ways that we can do that, and we'll get into that as we move through today's discussion. So why would you want to study with us? How will you be taught? How will we support you? And all of the related areas to that. That's essentially what we want to get into today. And let's get into it. So what sets this course apart from other courses at universities? I would suggest there are three main reasons that differentiate us, or there's three factors that differentiate us. The first is personalised teaching support. The University of Ulster Ulster University is number one in terms of student satisfaction in Northern Ireland, and the music subject is number one. So we're certainly working from a good starting position. Particularly over the last couple of months during lockdown, we have done really well in terms of supporting our students in quite difficult circumstances. The second is facilities. Having come from the studio world, and I know I'm probably slightly biased here, but I can tell you that our facilities are really, really good. And we're actually going to explore that a little bit more in the next couple of slides. So I'm just going to pause on that one for a second. And then the final point to make is just in relation to industry relevance. All of the staff are either working in or have come from the creative industries. We're very familiar with that world, in addition to the academic world. So everything that we do is about helping you make a good start into the creative industries and your creative career. The course itself, what's it about? There's three main strands to it. The first we refer to as digital composition, which is essentially constructing original audio material. There's lots of different ways to do that. We'll explore that in just a moment. There's the technology aspect, which is essentially using tools, both off-the-shelf tools and then bespoke tools that you will effectively make yourself using a combination of software and electronics, for example, to create new instruments, new interfaces, really exciting stuff around that. And then performance. And this term is a little ambiguous, but what it essentially means is, where will the material be played? Where is it going to be listened to? So that could be your straightforward music release, whether that be to some sort of media format, or it could be online these days. But also it could be into a venue, or it could be in a film, TV, radio, game. It could be what we refer to as ambient media, where it's arranged at some location, some public location. So there's lots and lots of scope there. So they're the three main aspects. And rather than me try to describe it and maybe not do so well at that, I'm going to switch now over to John, who's over in Studio One, and he's going to talk to you a little bit about what we do in that studio. Hey John, how you doing?
Hi, Greg. Thanks very much. So, as Greg said, my name's John. I'm the learning technologist at the school, but also one of the core teaching members of staff on the Music, Sound and Technologies program. And I'm joining you today from our main studio, our main traditional studio at least, Studio One. And you can see behind me the main heart of this control room space, which is our desk. And I'm going to talk in a moment a little bit more about the equipment and give you a brief tour of the facility. But I think there's some important points that I'd like to raise before that, and that is in relation to the way that content is delivered here. but also in the way that the space is utilized. Right. So in terms of the actual delivery of content that takes place in the studio environment, it's very practice focused. And it speaks towards this kind of industry relevancy that Greg talked about. So the module that you'll encounter in here is very much designed to mimic what happens in industry. But aside from that, this space is for students. This is a student space. It's a place where students come together to record music, to perform music, not just with the peers, not just with the other students on the music, sound, and technology program, but also with students on the other programs, such as music, for example. So rather than keep talking, let me give you a quick tour of the facilities, and we'll talk a little bit more about those as we go through. So here we can see depicted the main heart of the studio, the control console, which is just behind me in this space here. We take this ethos across multiple avenues in the course, which is combining the best analog technology with the best of digital. So this particular desk is just a fantastic analog console, which packs a lot of features into quite a small footprint. And that's the means by which we're kind of getting our signals to and from the performance space that I'll show you in a second. Here we can see it from another shot, and you can see in the background there the recording system on screen, which at the moment in this example is Logic, but we also run Pro Tools and Ableton Live in here as well. So there are many different options for those software avenues. So coupled with the desk, then we have, an array of analog hardware, and you can see some of that depicted here in the top two areas of this rack. So we're really keen on this idea of taking vintage-inspired, the best sounding vintage-inspired equipment and combining that with, high-tech digital tools. And I think that's an approach that is really, really flexible. And that carries forward then into the left-hand side of the studio, where we have an array of kind of analog processors, such as analog valve-based EQ, valve-based compression, and then some hybrid digital tools as well. In this rack also is at the bottom the area in which that we make the actual physical connections between the various spaces that we utilize. Here you can see an image of the main kind of entrance area to the performance space, which is just adjacent to the room that I'm in. We can see various pieces of equipment in here, such as keyboards, amplifiers. We have a vocal booth at the back there that can be reconfigured depending on how students want to work, and also we have an array of instruments in that space as well. So this is another shot from the same performance area, looking at the console in which I'm sitting at the moment. And to the back side of that area, we have a huge array of microphones, as you can see there. We have stands out the front of that control room space as well. So we carry, as I said, a huge array of microphones, and I won't list them here, but we can make those available to you if you like. But again, it's carrying forward this ethos of the best analog tools combined with the best of digital. What I'd like to do then is, rather than talk too much about this, is just give you a short demonstration of a student project from one of our second year groups that follow along with this sound engineering module, which is the main training module that you'll encounter. And this work is very much a work in progress, but an original piece written by one of our second year students, Ollie, who is also the guitarist and the vocalist on this work. But it's also a module that incorporates other musicians from the music pathway as well. And I think that's an important thing to mention here. So what I'm going to do here then is just play a short snippet of this. So let's have a listen.
Haven't washed these jeans in weeks. It reeks, but I don't care. Still need somebody to cut my hair, but I'm too broke. I don't smoke, but I drink, and some think that it's too much. At least I'm always coming in clutch, and that's no lie. Here's why. Living easy today. I don't give a shit about the pay. Don't stay in the cold, 'cause we got time to worry when we're old.
Okay, so the example in this case entirely recorded and entirely produced in this space by students working on their own, and I think that's something that is maybe not so common to encounter. So hopefully that gives you some idea of the type of work that goes on here. Thanks, Greg.
Great, thanks, John. That sounded really good. So that was Studio One. And you can actually see that right behind me, we have some more equipment, and I'm actually coming to you from Studio 2, which is a little bit different to Studio 1. Studio 1 does deals with the more traditional recording tasks, and Studio 2 is all about sound design. And sound design is what you would think it is. It's about designing sound and designing sound for lots of different contexts. So it can be for 2-channel stereo, as we would normally listen to things, for example, in these headphones, even though I have one ear off. That's a different discussion. So it can be for 2 channels, or it can be more experimental when you're dealing with multi-channel audio. So you can actually see there's 2 loudspeakers here, but there's actually another 6 moving around. So it's a lot of fun just playing around with moving audio around the space. But in here, sound design again. So there's lots of tools around manipulating audio and generating audio for very specific purposes and with a very specific intent in mind. So at the core of this is all about really understanding audio, what makes it up, the physics of it, the nature of it, how it behaves, and how we perceive it. So I'm just going to give you a quick tour. As I move, I have to bring a load of cables with me, so bear with me. And I may have to turn my back to you just briefly, so forgive me for being rude. But over here, we have a I lost my headphones, apologies for that. So over here we have a Moog Matriarch, and it does things like this. And then up here we have, it's called an MS1, but it's essentially a clone of a classic Roland synthesizer called an SH-101. Back in my music production days, I had 2 of these, and they're just great for making just weird, odd little bits of sounds that you need. Loads of fun. And then over here, we have a Eurorack modular synthesizer, which sounds like this. Well, it's being triggered by this Arturia device, so you can, this is just a trigger, but this is the actual synthesis part. So. And then we can add in a drum machine. And then all of that is synchronized over to a computer over here, just off the side of the camera. Sorry, I can't show you that. And it's running Ableton Live. In fact, all of the audio that you're currently hearing from me is all coming via Ableton Live. So it all works. Anyway, they're the 2 studios. I hope that gives you some insight. We have one other studio, which we've just developed this year, and that's more focused on post-production. Post-production Post-production, dealing with audio after it's being essentially recorded and produced, but also dealing with things like sound for picture and TV, and some of those types of applications. It's a term that can mean absolutely anything, to be honest, but it's much more process heavy. Let's call it that. So there are the demonstrations. So what do we talk about in the course? Well, here's a quick overview. And rather than list all the modules, which would be maybe not so clear, I've just summarized what we cover in each of the years. And we have different access routes into the course, which is, we'll get into that in a little bit. But in year one is primarily the fundamentals. So we'll deal with sequencing, sampling, and synthesis, which I've actually just shown you, synthesis, what the synthesizers were doing. The drum machine is essentially a sampler. And then the sequencing, all what's being done in Ableton Live over here to my left as I'm sitting here. We'll also introduce you to the essentials of programming electronics. Don't worry, you don't need to know any of these. We'll start from the very beginning and move all the way through. And this is at the core of building your ability to personalize your sound, your performance, and really interesting stuff around that. And then, of course, we are a university program, so the historical context is important. And for the historical context in this sense is the theory component. And for that, all it really means is understanding genres, artists, great movements, the things that got us to where we are today. And you have to understand here's the historical context if you were to essentially place your work in some way that makes sense. Moving into year two, then, more, well, as you've just heard from John, that's the year where we go big on audio recording. And we'll also actually in the same semester we'll actually work on sound design for games, which is one of the modules I work on. We work with the game designers in Belfast, and using some of the skills that John has taught you in the studio and then some additional bits that I'll add, we will develop audio for games. That includes both the music and original sound effects and sound design and Foley. So last year we had really some great examples. We even had one student who went and recorded real gunshots that then went into a game and were really impressive. So those kinds of things we deal with. We'll then also talk about acoustics and cognition. So acoustics is how sound behaves in space, and cognition is how we hear it. And then another side to this, which is important, and it's one of these parallel skills, that is sometimes lost, but it's really important, particularly in the area of music, because music is by its very nature a highly collaborative act. It's always based around teams. So for example, you think of that sublime combination of the musical band, the outfit, that is collaboration in a nutshell. So we'll talk about what makes successful collaborations and how do you perform as part of that. And as it turns out, this is a huge life skill that goes well beyond the relatively local area focus that we'll talk about here. You then have an optional placement year where you can either go and work in industry or study abroad. It is an option. We find that it's a very valuable option to consider because it helps you build confidence, and you help to start to essentially realize your value and the possible contribution you can make, not only to the creative industries, but industry in general. And then into final year. Final year is it's very much the more focused year. You will, over the first and second years, start to explore your creativity more, and we'll essentially give you much more free space gradually to explore that. But in final year, it really is your ideas and your goals and your aims to explore. Lots more on sound for picture. There's a post-production module. There's sound for film, very popular module. There's entrepreneurship. So for most people in the creative industries, entrepreneurship is just a reality. We won't call it that, but that's what it is in effect, because you'll be working on one project to another project, or you might be coming in as a freelancer, or you might be running your own business, providing sound design files to some other company that uses them in some other context. That, folks, is entrepreneurship. We just don't call it that typically, but that's what it is. So we're going to talk about that and help you prepare for that. So conversations around tax and setting up businesses and developing ideas and all those kinds of things. And then of course there's the final project, which is your final dissertation, where you essentially go big on some project of your own. How do we work? Typically there's 3 modules in a semester, 20 credits each is what we refer to them. It's how we refer to them, so it's 60 credits in each semester. The more important parts here are, it's about 16 hours contact staff time, and I can tell you that's high by standards. So you get a lot of support from us and contact with us, and you're constantly in touch with us, developing ideas and talking about things, listening to things and just going over things. And it's approximately a 35-hour week. And the last 2 then, really, we learn by doing. We're big fans of this, particularly in this creative arts area. You can read books and you can watch videos, but ultimately, in the end, you have to apply it. And that's what we talk about active learning. It's learning by doing, okay? And then the practice focus. The whole program is built around practice, which you've now seen from John and hopefully from myself, that none of this is theoretical. It's always hands-on and trying to create things. A point that John alluded to earlier on, and it's one of the things that sets us aside from many other institutions, is not only do we have good facilities, but you get access to them from year 1. Okay, and it's an important point to consider. You will get access from year 1. And we will step you through it. There's a short induction for most of the studios. Studio 2 or Studio 1 is a little bit more detailed because there's more involved in it. But we try and get you in there as soon as possible. And then in addition to all of that, we have lots of equipment that you can take out on loan, go off and record birdsong or whatever it is, random example, but it's what came to mind. And just record whatever you need and put that into some sort of creative idea. And again, because it's all learning by doing, it's all project based, there are no exams. We had an exam for year 1 and then we have now ditched that. So there's no exams whatsoever anymore. It's all learning by doing. So here we have a quick summary of all of this again. Learning by doing, project based, no exams. One-to-one mentoring, which is important, access to really good facilities from the day that you enter. Our class sizes are small, so typically 20 to 24, so that works hand in hand with the really close contact you have with staff. Our door is always open, and that's not just some throwaway remark. We are just all too keen to speak to young people about their ideas and their ambitions. And then, of course, what I mentioned before, the industry focus. In that we're always thinking about that and trying to be as relevant to it as possible, thinking about where we've been, where we are, and then what's next. We've already talked about the facilities, so we can skip through this, but what we haven't mentioned is the 2 dedicated labs that we have, which are filled with Apple Mac computers. We are largely based around Apple, but that's not to say you need one to come here. No. Most of the software that we use is actually cross-platform, and we're absolutely open to whatever platform people need to use. The platform shouldn't make that much of a difference. We just have a tendency to work with Apple for various reasons. And then in addition to all that, there's a selection of performance spaces where we can put on small events or arrange demonstrations of, for example, physical computing or an audio installation or whatever it is. In terms of the COVID impact, I'm delighted that we are now back on campus, and I can talk to you today from Studio 2 in my case, and John's in Studio 1. Next week is week 5, we're back on campus, and it's great to be back on campus and be with people again. And we're under no illusions that it's been difficult for everyone. So we're taking our time with this and we're being very careful. And yeah, so for the plans for 22-23 are to continue to return to campus and to return to teaching on campus. So I have some feedback here from students. Sorry, as I just adjust my headphones. I have some students. I'm not going to insult your intelligence by reading it. You can read it here yourself. I like that one because it sort of echoes our attempt to cover a wide breadth of material, which is something that we genuinely do try to do, because there's a lot to talk about. So that's more on breadth of material covered and the detail and the care that we paid to it. And this maybe is another point that's worth emphasizing in relation to why come to university. And sometimes I have to remind our young people about it. You remember that this isn't going to be like many of the previous environments you may have experienced. You will be in a room of people who are absolutely like-minded and focused on the same set of things, which makes for a completely different learning environment. And to be around creative people is in itself incredibly inspiring and motivating. And I like this one just because of the mention of problem solving. Creativity is largely about connecting disparate ideas, and that in itself is a puzzle that needs to be solved, right? So I like that one. So in relation to your student experience then, just to mention that we have a number of student societies which are there to support a range of interests and activities. MST has its own society. We weren't able to do a lot with that last year, but we are hoping to progress that more this year, realising things like gigs and in or around the city. And the school and the subject will support us in that in every way it can. We also have within the music subject itself, then there's the overall music society, there's the Irish Traditional Music Society, which is usually popular. Then we also have Ulster Choir, and the University of Ulster Choir it's of international renown. It is an excellent ensemble, and you can check out their website. We also have jazz band. Many of our students join the jazz band, so if you play an instrument, you can hop in on that. And then we have the Oscillations and Modulations event, which is actually run by John and Brian and Johnny Delaney, one of our part-time teachers. So it's an event we run in the city and bring together lots of different artists and ideas and just throw them all together and see what happens. And then, of course, the city of Derry is home to the Celtronic Festival, which is the largest electronic music festival on the island. And we are doing our very best to develop close links with them. I just want to spend a moment talking about careers, and there's two parts to this. There's the more specific end of it, and then there's the general end of it. And the point I would like to make is that we have a tendency to over-index on very specific skills. And the problem with that then is that we tend to sometimes neglect more important, bigger life skills. And I've already mentioned one of them, which is collaboration. Because when we talk to employers, these are the things that they're looking for. So the ability to work with other people, the ability to communicate, the ability to self-start, the ability to manage projects, problem solving, which we've already seen in the feedback, which is great. And then, of course, demonstrated practical experience. You can create things, you can build things, you can make things. I would like to think that we work very hard in addressing all of this. So even after when you graduate, maybe you change your mind, or maybe you find another opportunity that's of interest to you, you will find that many of the things that you've learned are transferable. What that means is, well, how you learn, if you can manage a music project, you can manage pretty much any project because the components won't vary all that much. The principles remain the same, as an example. Getting more specific then, I would just like to highlight on our website, I've written some thoughts. I've put together some thoughts on careers. There's the URL for it, musicsoundtechnology.com/ You have to use that hashtag. It's not just /careers, it's #careers. And that's very much focused on careers in the creative industries. We know it's difficult. On one hand, the creative industries is booming. It's really, really large and growing all the time. But on the other side, it's hard to know where to start and how to get in. And I, speaking personally, I know this. I started making tea, coffee, and essentially cleaning in a studio, and then worked my way through it. So it's a weird place to enter. It's not quite like that anymore, thankfully. But we are focused on helping you address that and find your niche, so to speak. But we are very much focused on the areas that we will really focus on. I don't know, I'm covering a little bit of it, but sound design. So sound design as applies to games, film, documentary, and advertising. And all of these are huge growth areas at the minute. Interactive audio applications, again, a sort of a very broad title, which can mean lots of different things, but it can be web, it can be mobile, it can be experimental, it can be commercial, loads of opportunity. Essentially, think about where audio is used today, and you know, it's a long list, right? So that's what I'm getting at there. And then of course, sound engineering and audio production, including post-production. Performance, we have lots of musicians who join us and then simply want to use the course to develop their artistic ambitions. And then technical roles, you'll be deeply technical, you will get deeply technical on this program. And then event management, which is turning out to be hugely popular. Students who want to arrange concerts and gigs and festivals and all those kinds of things. And then of course you can proceed to research, stay within academia and continue on to maybe do a master's or even a PhD. So in terms of what you need to join us, coming from further education, there are a number of pathways. I've mentioned 3 here. There's the BTEC, HNC and HND. The BTEC itself is large and varied. So we have what's called an equivalence table. And it's actually, I'm just going to show you it here. It's on our website, and there's the URL for it. Again, musicsoundtechnology.com/entry. So you can actually see how whatever course you're currently working on, how that actually breaks down. We'll keep that up to date and current for you. But for the HNC, it's more or less straightforward. You need a distinction to get into year 1. For HND, an overall merit will get you into year 1. Or for year 2 entry, which we do offer, year 2 entry is with the HND in a related area. And if you have any questions about any of this, just get in touch. There's sessions later on today that deal with all of this as well, because it is a relatively detailed question. But you can email admissions@ulster.ac.uk and you'll get through to the team very quickly. Again, I've touched on this, the COVID question. We are returning to campus carefully, safely, and we're looking forward to continuing that into 22-23. So that's pretty much it from us. The only thing I'd like to do now is just go over to any sort of questions that you have. You will see that there's the chat on YouTube, so if you have any questions, please fire them in there. And I'm just going to flash our contact details. Just there was one final moment before I go back to John. So, hey John.
Hey.
Good to see you. So, any questions? We have lots of time, so don't worry. Question here on placement. So placement, well, we can actually both discuss this. So the placement is an option for the 3rd year. So if you join us in first year, it'll be first year, second year, and then the placement. Or if you join us in second year, join the second year, and then go into the placement. And there's 2 pathways. There's the industrial placement, which actually John looks after. And then there's the study abroad option, where you essentially go to visit a supporting institution, Europe, United States, and you study a related area. And that's great for confidence building. Would you like to say anything about the industrial placement, John?
Yeah, so what happens there is it's usually referred to, one area of it, at least the industrial placement option, is referred to as DPP. And what's great about that is you actually come out with a, a unique and distinct accreditation after being through that as well. So if you do successfully go on placement, then that's assessed separately, really, from the main course. So you would end up with your degree at the end, but also a diploma in professional practice, it's referred to. And then also you have that option to go and study abroad if you wish.
Great, thanks, John.
Yeah.
There's a
Yeah, I
question
think
here.
some other.
Go ahead.
Sorry.
No, go ahead.
I think another thing to really highlight with that is that the university has a fantastic international system for this, which is fairly recent, but it's called Handshake. So essentially, companies from all over the world really will put up available posts on this system, and students can really develop their profile on that over the first 2 years before that placement comes in. So they have a really good chance of securing a placement, but also potentially employment when they finish as well.
Great, yeah, good to mention. There's a question on what software do we use. I'm assuming this is software in relation to audio production.
Yeah. Well, I can address that if you like. It's a long list.
It is a long list.
So it's a long list. In relation to, I'm assuming you're maybe focusing more on the digital audio workstation side of things. So we use pretty much everyone that you've heard of. So we have Logic, Ableton Live, and also Pro Tools in the studio here. So it really varies depending on the space that you're using. We tend to start out with either Logic or another system called Waveform, which is made by a company called Traction, which is a great starting point for somebody that hasn't encountered a DAW before. So I think what we're more focused on is teaching technique that you can take across any of those systems. I think that's more beneficial, right? So if you learn, we focus on the technique, then you can pick up Pro Tools and you can use that down here, and you can pick up Logic maybe in the labs or in another studio, and fluidly kind of transition between using one system and the other.
Great.
So aside from the DAWs, we run a lot of kind of audio focused applications that maybe you haven't heard of. One called Max, which is where we do the audio coding, and the various other ones that I won't bore you with right now.
Great. Thanks, John. Okay, that seems to be it on the questions. Before we sign off, I just wanted to quickly remind you of the subject website, musicsoundtechnology.com. You'll find lots of information there about us, plus the ability to contact us and get straight to the team. And that's really it from us. Thank you, and I hope that was helpful, and we'll see you all again soon.
Thanks.
Take care.